Dane Brugler released his top 100 prospects for the NFL draft. And so for us, we need to know, what does this mean for our dynasty fantasy football drafts? How many of these players are going to be interesting? How many players won't? How is he seeing this first 3 rounds compared to how other people are seeing it? Let's break all that down right now. Let's get into it. At the quarterback position, we have 6 players inside of the top 100 guys. Like I said, there's 101 picks with compensatory picks inside of the first 3 rounds. We've got 6 quarterbacks going in there. Now, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, this is somewhat telling for me because prospect-wise, they're not crazy dissimilar. Both quarterbacks with pretty good arms. Neither one is overly mobile, but it seems like Cam Ward might have a slight edge in both of those, but Shedeur Sanders might be a little bit more accurate. So from an NFL draft perspective, how is one of the best in the business evaluating these guys? Well, right now, Cam Ward is the 15th overall prospect, while Shedeur Sanders is 25th overall. So there's a fairly large and sizable gap between the two as far as their ability goes. Now, will it be a team fit, system fit, personality fit? All of these things can play into it. But as far as just a raw prospect goes, it does seem like this matches up with how a lot of people view it, where these 2 guys are clearly ahead of the rest of the draft, but there is a slight edge to Cam Ward. Now, the other 4 guys, we have 3 of them that are roughly ranked around at the end of the second round, which we know NFL draft-wise means they'll probably get pushed up into the early second round, or some of them maybe even late first round. Jackson Dart is at 57. Tyler Shuck, which is kind of a surprising one out of Louisville, is ranked 59th overall, and then Jalen Milroe at 61. So all 3 of these quarterbacks very close together. As far as just their ability goes, has them as a late second, but we know that quarterback position is like the opposite of running back, where they're always getting pushed up, even if maybe they don't deserve it overall. Jackson Dart, I think, still has an outside shot to be a first-round pick, where it seems like Jalen Milroe's stock has fallen quite a bit since the Senior Bowl, and I would be surprised if he actually ended up being a first-round selection. Seems pretty locked in to be an upside day 2 guy right here. Last one is Will Howard. He's ranked 84th, so ranked as a third-round pick. I can see him going end of the second, beginning of the third. What Will Howard did in the college football playoffs really elevated his draft stock. He is somebody that has all of the tools, maybe not the crazy upside of some other players in this class, but there's no area where you say he's severely lacking. He has all the experience, so he could be a really interesting name to watch for a team that might take a developmental type quarterback. And I put that in air quotes because he's a little bit of an older prospect. I don't think it would take him long to develop, and I think he could be a legit NFL quarterback. All right. For Dynasty Fantasy Football, though, we want to move to the meat and the potatoes, and that is running back and wide receiver. Now, I personally would probably have more than this, but Dane Brugler has 8 running backs inside his top 100. Just for reference, last year, there were only 4 running backs that went in the first 3 rounds, and 3 of those 4 were third-round guys. So we definitely know this is clearly a much better running back class, and there's going to be some good names that we'll be able to get in our Dynasty rookie drafts. Clearly, first and foremost, as it should be in my opinion, Ashton Jeanty is at number 5. There's nobody within 30 spots of him. He is far and away the best running back in the class, and I've heard rumblings, well, maybe he's not the best. No, he's the best back in the class. That is no shade at any of the other backs. There's a lot of very talented backs in this class, but to me, it's clear Ashton Jeanty is that guy. At the second and third spot, and back-to-back in the running back rankings and in the overall rankings for Dane Brugler, we have Kaleb Johnson at 35 and Omarion Hampton at 36. Both of these players, big physical guys, both could be 3 down backs. I'm not as big of a fan of Kaleb Johnson. I know other people have him rated very highly, and I get it. There's a lot to like on tape, but I don't think he has the burst and the explosiveness of Omarion Hampton. And I think Hampton is as good, if not better, receiver than he is getting credit for currently. So for me, I'd have Hampton over Kaleb Johnson, but I'd also have this next guy over them, which falls a little bit to the 49, so still in the top 50, but falls a little bit down to TreVeyon Henderson. Henderson might be a little bit more of a system fit than maybe these other two running backs, but for dynasty fantasy football purposes, I think he could end up being the top dog because of all of the receiving work that I think he will get, in addition to what he does on the ground. If you like guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Chase Brown, that's the type of mold I think TreVeyon Henderson's going to be in, although I think he might be the biggest of that group as far as his ability to be able to take on hits and punishment. I think TreVeyon Henderson is the best of that group. Also, sneaky good in pass protection, which is something that NFL teams love to have out of their running backs. A little bit of surprise here. The 5th ranked running back for Dane Brugler, number 62 overall on his big board. So basically rated as a late 2nd round pick, Jordan James out of Oregon. Now, I haven't done a ton of tape study on him because honestly, for the most part, I haven't seen him this high many places. That being said, the running back out of Oregon, we just saw a running back out of Oregon last year that performed pretty well in Bucky Irving. So maybe Jordan James has a little bit of that in his game. He's not the biggest running back, but he is a guy that can break some tackles, make some big plays down the field. So I'm keeping an eye on Jordan James, and this is definitely motivating me to dig into his tape a little bit more. Now, these next 3 guys, I have done some deep tape evaluation for all 3. The next up is Quinshon Judkins. I, at this point, am surprised to see such a big gap between Kaleb Johnson, Omarion Hampton, Trey Henderson, and then all the way down to Quinshon Judkins. Caleb's at 35, Omarion 36, Trey Henderson at 49. We just mentioned James, and then Quinshon all the way down at 70. So fairly large gap between those guys. And look, I know maybe his season at Ohio State wasn't quite as flashy as his earlier tape in Ole Miss, but that same guy's still there. But when you watch the nuance of how he runs, he is a very, very talented running back that can do it in all 3 phases of the game. If he really does fall to the early to mid 3rd round, this guy is going to be an absolute steal and in the NFL draft and then in your rookie drafts as well, because you know that's going to push him down some people's boards and you'll be getting him at a great value. At 80, we have Dylan Sampson, a guy that's a little bit undersized, but man, he carried the rock for Tennessee this year. Some great explosiveness, better between the tackles than I think you would expect for a guy that's probably going to weigh in sub 200 pounds or maybe right at 200 pounds. So a really, really intriguing name that is an absolute home run threat, as is the next guy in RJ Harvey, and he is number 95, our last running back. He's going to be a shorter guy, probably coming in at around 5'7" or so. But that being said, he was highly, highly productive in that UCF offense, and he can absolutely make guys miss in the open field. So RJ Harvey, the last running back out of this group. For this wide receiver class not being quite as good as maybe some of the other wide receiver classes, there are still 5 guys that are ranked as first rounders according to Dane Brugler. Looking at it right now, we have Travis Hunter at 1, and yes, he's probably going to actually be a corner, but we'll see. For these purposes, we'll still throw him into this list. Tet McMillian at 7, Luther Burden at 20, Emeka Egbuka at 24, and Matthew Golden at 27. When you look at the other 4 outside of Hunter, it's a really interesting group because all of them win very different ways. Tet McMillian, he is huge, 6'5". He can go up and get the football, but surprisingly agile for a guy that has that type of length. He is a guy that can also do a little bit after the catch. So you like what you get there. Speaking of after the catch, Luther Burden, a smaller guy, but much more compact. And he's basically a running back that happens to be a wide receiver, can make some absolutely electric plays in the open field, but it's not just due to raw speed. He makes a lot of guys miss, but also can be physical with these players and break some tackles as well. Think more a la Deebo Samuel type of player. Then at 24, you have Emeka Egbuka. This guy is going to be an NFL coach's dream. Always in the right place at the right time. Very, very solid, steady hands. By all accounts, an incredible leader on this national championship team for Ohio State. But watch him in the blocking. If you draft him as a wide receiver, he is instantly improving your running game because he will get downfield and make big time blocks at the wide receiver position. Last one of that group, Matthew Golden, ranked 27th on the big board. It was all about Isaiah Bond preseason, but Matthew Golden, the transfer, was a guy that really broke onto the scene this year, and specifically in the college football playoffs against some of those top teams that they played. This Texas wide receiver showed he might be the real deal, and that deep threat that teams are looking for without sacrificing a ton of size like we've seen out of a lot of speedsters. We go from the end of the first round at pick 27 to all the way down to pick 48. Now, this is just his big board, but still, we're looking at, end of the first round to mid to late second is Jayden Higgins. Jayden Higgins, big-time wide receiver out of Iowa State. And in fact, his teammate, Jalen Noel, also shows up here, but not till pick 72. So almost a round difference between the two players. Jayden Higgins, your more traditional X. He's got the size, but he's got some things to work on, as does the number 58 guy, Jalen Royals. I like Royals quite a bit out of Utah State, a guy that missed some time due to injury, but he made some big-time plays, as did number 68 off the board, Trey Harris. He missed a little bit of time, but boy, when we're talking about a deep threat that can make big plays for your offense, but is not sacrificing any size. We're looking at a guy that's probably going to come in around 6'2" and probably around 200 some pounds. He is every bit a legit size at wide receiver, but can still make the big plays. I mentioned Jalen Noel, him and the guy next to him at number 74, Jack Beck. So 72 and 74, both of these guys, really, really good Senior Bowls. Noel was probably the wide receiver of the week in practice, and then Beck ended up having the awesome game to take home the Senior Bowl MVP. We have three guys that just snuck in the last 11 picks: Tez Johnson at 89, Alec Ayomanor at 90, and Isaiah Bond at 94. All of these guys, tremendous upside, but you have to wonder about a few things in their game. Tez and Isaiah Bond, it's more about their size. Are they just true speedsters, or can they actually get it done at the next level? Ayomanor, he's got the size that you would want out of a wide receiver, and he makes some really good plays, but we haven't seen a lot of Stanford receivers come out and be very, very effective. Can he break that curse and be the Stanford receiver that finally starts to show out? Last but certainly not least, let's get over to the tight end position. We have two guys inside the top 11 picks: Tyler Warren at 10, Colston Loveland at 11. Dane Brugler talks very highly of both of these guys. Both players have the requisite size, and they've got really good receiving game abilities. Warren obviously had the much better numbers this year because the Michigan offense was really pretty poor, specifically in the passing game. But what Colston did, he still doubled anybody else on their team as far as receiving yardage goes, despite missing some games towards the end of the year. Both these Big Ten tight ends are physical players that can be split out, but can be used in a variety of different ways. I think Warren has the slight edge as far as athleticism goes, and that's why we see him a little bit higher here in Dane's board. Two more guys linked closely together: Mason Taylor and Elijah Ororo. Those are 39 and 37. Both these players, big time opportunities. Mason Taylor at 37 here. He is the son of former NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, played tight end at LSU and had a really solid career and could just do anything you ask him to do. He is one of those all-around players that you can just trust and count on. Elijah Ororo, though, might be the better receiving option for your Dynasty fantasy football drafts, and he really elevated his stock at the Senior Bowl as well, coming in at a legit 6'4" and almost a half. Worried that he might be a little bit smaller than that, but he was not, and then weighed in over 250 pounds, which for him to be able to move like he does at that size and weight is a really, really good sign for his future career. Kind of on an island by himself, we have Gunnar Helm at pick 64. So if these were actual picks, this would be the last pick of the second round. The move tight end there from Texas showed quite a bit this season with Quinshon. Can he be a piece in an offense that might be at a really good value? Because he showed a lot of athletic ability with the Texas Longhorns this past season. At 82 and 98, we get our last two tight ends, both very different ends of the spectrum. At 82, we have an undersized guy at 82, Harold Fannin, the small school stud out of Bowling Green, put up 1,500 receiving yards this year, which is absolutely unheard of at the position, but a little bit undersized at 6'3", weighed in the 230s, and didn't have the movement skills that we were all hoping at the position. There's even rumor that maybe he makes a better fullback than he does a true legitimate tight end. We'll see how everything works out there. And then Terrace Ferguson out of Oregon. He's number 98, the last guy of all the players that we're talking about here. Ferguson, he's dealt with some injuries, but he's got the good size, and he's kind of your traditional tight end, can do a little bit of everything, but he's got really solid hands and could be a good name to keep an eye on in your dynasty drafts late in the 3rd or 4th round. That wraps up our top 100 from Dane Brugler. All these guys are interesting. If you have a guy that is inside of the top 3 rounds, he's somebody you're keeping an eye, whether it's Superflex, 1QB, you're keeping an eye on them. Specifically, the strength of this class is going to be those running backs. There were still several that weren't listed that I think could get drafted very late on day 3 or high in round 4. We're talking about guys like Devin Neal, Ollie Gordon, Kyle Manungai. There's a lot of other really good names in this class that I think could be really awesome additions to your dynasty fantasy football team. So just because they didn't make the top 100 here doesn't mean that they won't be on draft day, and it doesn't mean that they can't still be a value, a la Bucky Irving last year, Tyrone Tracy last year. They fell in drafts. They were lower on people's boards, but man, they panned out great for your dynasty fantasy football teams.